then we just do it that way, this way. I already heard how loud it is. It might catch on fire. It might catch on fire if we do it that fast. But if we do it faster, we can't go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Abington Heights School Board meeting for Wednesday, April 3rd. Would you all please rise and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Can we please have roll call?
I'm working on it, I apologize. Mr. Abdallah.
Here.
Mr. Azar.
Here.
Mrs. Henderson. Here. Mrs. Hillebrand. Here. Mrs. Karam. Mr. Moran.
Here.
Mr. Robeson.
Here.
Mrs. Tierney. Here. Mr. Acker.
Here.
Thank you and welcome.
Very much. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any changes to the agenda? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Hillebrand. Yes. Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0.
Dr. Schaefer, I noticed that superintendent's report would be next. I'm guessing we have a presentation tonight. Do we want to do the
You
presentation?
should have something far more important than budget tonight.
Absolutely right.
South Abington Comet Connect, right? Turn it over to Ms. Coyne.
Hold on, Mrs. Coyne, I'm working on it.
Signed up for April's for the student presentation, and as I was brainstorming and thinking of different things that we could do, Common Connect immediately came to mind. Jackie Hooker, our Common Connect teacher, who comes from all 4 elementary buildings, has taken this program for the last little over a year and a half and has completely transformed it. Students love going to her class, students love exploring and learning. And we focus during fourth grade creating STEM projects for our STEM night. So as I went to Mrs. Hooker and said, what could we do for our fourth presentation, we immediately thought of selecting fourth grade projects. So we have a robotics project and we have an engineering project. Before our students have the opportunity to display their projects, I would like for them to introduce themselves. The ladies would like to use the microphone if that's okay.
Hello, my name is Amelia Valello. I'm Ella McCullough. I'm Addison Sazzle. I'm Cora Jeffroy. I'm Eulalie Monahan.
And our other team decided they're not too sure about using the microphone. They would just like to introduce themselves as
Peer pressure.
What's up? My name is Dominic Zermeno.
My name is Lincoln Berry. My name is Asher Tinkleman. My name is Elba Hu.
Right, so before they display, we have a quick presentation, if you don't mind, just to give you a little more information about our Common Connect program.
Go.
So again, my name is Jackie. So watching Mrs. Coyne for inviting us to come and share with the board and the community what we're doing in Common Connect. So Common Connect is a STEM class, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's a class that aligns with the PA Steel standards. We cover engineering and technology in our K-4 program. Again, it's grades K-4 and we meet twice a month since I'm traveling between all of the schools. What's covered in our engineering units, we focus on the design process. So the projects that you'll see today have gone through the design process, and we're still working our way through the design process as we approach our STEM time. So students have just picked their own projects, they planned it themselves, they decided on what materials
Dr. Schaefer, they'd like to have the school board standing behind them. Not me, you know, these guys.
They just want their pictures of the kids.
That's something I would ask.
Anthony just wear it off. You want to be in it. You want to be in the photo. It's a nice vest.
Thank you.
We're good. Kelly, thank you so much.
See you guys tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay. If we want.
Warren, before you leave, I'm gonna have you sign 2 blank certs.
Sure.
And then we'll fill in our names.
Yep, downstairs.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do public comment first.
Public comment now.
Yes, yeah, we'll just do that now.
We're all waiting with bated breath for Mr. Mirabelli's presentation, but, you know, I don't know if anybody will mind waiting a little longer and we'll have public comment instead. So, please let us know who you are, where you live.
Yeah.
She lives next to you, well, now that's a problem.
Jennifer Patrica on Bryan Drive in South Abington Township. So it was 2-part. I just thought maybe you would be talking a little bit more about this property, and the possible sale of it. Do you know when you'll be speaking of that or will you be speaking about that at all in the future?
Sure. In the future, right now, I can tell you where we're at. At the last board meeting, we hired Rocco Valvano to do a deed search. So we're still working on the results of the deed search. And what I had indicated at that meeting is, at this point, we don't even know if we're able to sell these properties. So what we have to do is just do some due diligence and explore that. And then, based on that information, we would work with Mr. Valvano and get an appraisal.
Okay.
Let's say we were able to sell, not saying that we would, at least we know that that is an option the board could consider. Next, we would get an appraisal. Maybe an appraisal comes back and the board says, you know what, that appraisal is a little low, it's not worth us moving. So there's still a lot of things that we need to do. But as we talk about over the next 5 to 7 years improving our facilities, we would be selling ourselves short if we didn't take a look at every single option. So that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. And then, can you give me an update? I kind of fell out of the loop. So I have 3 sons, 2 graduated, one's a sophomore, and all baseball players. So, there's been some rumblings of the baseball team. So I guess I'm the only one here representing. Nobody came. But I apologize because I did not really hear the facilities that are being updated, but I know baseball was kind of left out. Now, that being said, my son Teddy, who's a sophomore, when he was in middle school, we were kind of told that it would be turf by the time he was a sophomore, which is now. So, obviously, it's not happening probably in his tenure here. So can you just give me an update on maybe like why baseball was left out and the process that it went through to, because the field is, it is, like, quite honestly, it's a disaster. Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that we have a field that doesn't live up to the name of Abington Heights. You know, there's balls that pop up and hit people in the face because the field isn't level. And quite honestly, I mean, I don't know if it's possible to go out, but I know like Mid-Valley just got a donation of their baseball field. It was, I don't even know how many million of dollars, but it's gorgeous and it was donated.
I can't comment on Mid-Valley, but what I can tell you is that I would agree that our fields across all of our different facilities that we use can be much better, and they're not commensurate with the expectations that I have, and I'm sure the board has. However, with that said, the board has a lot of heavy decisions to make, and at the top of the list are all the different facility improvements that we need to make. So in deciding to work on what I would call the auxiliary field to the left, if you're looking at the stadium from the school, that would be able to house 6 different sports. So boys and girls lacrosse, boys and girls soccer, girls field hockey, and girls softball, not to mention the various practices. As far as the baseball field goes, we use that just for one. With that said, we put in $80,000 at the beginning of the year to see what would happen if we did some work that didn't include a lot of plowing, a lot of digging, a lot of pipes and things like that, to see how that may hold up. But what the board did agree to and sign off on is Quad 3, and we'll do there's an engineering firm that will permit the whole high school to, if the board decides to do that work. So we'll be doing some drainage where the new turf field would be, and we've also talked about what would it look like if we wanted to do that baseball field area. Should we do it? But we will have a permit for 5 years. There's also been a lot of discussion, I believe we'll be moving forward in some way, shape, or form with a capital campaign. And based on the 2 scoreboards that we put in the high school auditorium, we did have a lot of community outreach, and those are already beginning to pay themselves off, and I believe they will pay themselves off pretty quickly. If we have that level of interest, and I think that we would be able to get to our fields sooner rather than later. While I won't make any promises where the board may go, I do believe that starting with that auxiliary field, having 6 different sports on there, as well as some practices, which the baseball field would, baseball team would be able to use, is a good first start.
So is that the field, that's the field hockey field, it's in between the track and the baseball field? Is that what you're talking about?
No, she's talking about the practice soccer field. The practice soccer field.
Yeah. To the left.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's where they throw the jab. If you've seen a track meet, they throw the javelin.
So
And
the
this.
field hockey field is not being touched either,
No, because field hockey would play on that.
the one that I just described?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, the new turf.
Yeah.
Oh, they play on the new turf, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. And then softball's gonna move over to that, so they wouldn't play where they play now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Dr. Schaefer, did you just say also, though, that baseball could practice on that?
Not fully, but.
Not fully, but it will be another area
I mean,
where they could.
It's good for them to like today, and probably even if it wasn't raining today, like their field probably wouldn't even be playable, only because
So
even
much
if the
rain,
drainage
yeah.
worked, I mean, the cleats would tear up the field. So they do like to practice on turf occasionally because they can at least get the practice in rather than like being in a gym. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's at least, you know, something that's plausible and.
Yeah.
Um,
And we've had a lot of, the group that we had coming from Lancaster to work on the baseball and softball fields earlier in the year, they're one of the country's leading experts in that. And, you know, I peppered them with a lot of questions to say, what would we need to do to make this a fantastic natural grass surface? And I asked the same thing of the engineering company. So we have those discussions, and I'll be very transparent with you. I also talk with my colleagues, and what everybody says to a person is, hey, we would love to play on natural grass. Nothing beats natural grass. However, availability trumps everything.
Yeah.
And we are northeastern Pennsylvania,
Right.
so, you know, someone told me today that, hey, we're going to get some snow, Chris, Thursday night.
Yeah.
And it's, I was like, really?
Yeah.
So, and like you said, nobody's playing today because we've had 3-4 days of rain, and no matter what we do, drainage, it's gonna,
Right.
it's gonna be there. So, I know I'm probably not providing you the answer you want, but I am
it's
optimistic,
okay.
and I would like to, I would like to see a better a baseball field, because quite honestly, I want all the kids on the community to be up here on our fields, enjoying sports, being introduced to Abington Heights High School, like what it's like to be a Comet. You're 5, 6 years old and you're playing soccer on one of those fields. I watched the little football kids play on the football field, and that has everything to do with that availability, safety and availability.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I'll relay the message. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Schaefer?
All right, thank you very much. At this time, I will introduce Jim Mirabelli, who is going to talk to us a little bit about our current budget as well as our projected budget, and we'll be able to have a little bit of a discussion on that.
Thank you. You might be sleeping here. There's a big tree.
On the screen, I'm using the screen so that we can all stay on the same page here, so to speak. So tonight, I would like to have a discussion about budget. We'll keep it focused there. We've had a lot of discussion about finance in terms of debt and different things like that. But tonight, I want to focus on the current year budget and where we stand, as well as what next year's budget is starting to look like. We're not going to get into line item granular detail, but as we head into budget season, board members in the community need to know what the budget outlook is and what some of the headwinds and tailwinds are. So if you turn to the first page, which is budget analysis, this is actually just a copy of what it is that you receive on a monthly basis, okay? And I've made some highlights here. And if I'm a board or community member looking through here, I look at some of the bigger numbers and some of the bigger things, like real estate taxes. You'll notice that not only are we up about $1.4 million year over year, but we also beat the budget in the real estate taxes by about $400,000. So that's a headwind in the current year. Tax collections are now done after December 31st. So that is going to end up being a positive variance in this year's budget, okay? And as we forecast out, we look at each one of these variances to try to determine where we're going to end up at the end of the year. So the revenues are a little bit easier to predict. We'll take the wage tax, you see a good indicator there. We had a strong number at 5.145 million last year come in. And you can see we're about $300,000 ahead of pace. The only thing I'll mention with wage tax is it's not exactly linear, and the deposits don't come in at the same time. There's different filings, and larger employers file at different times, and so it's not always precise as to the timing there. But it is a good indicator that we're on track to come ahead of budget there. Kind of moving right down, you'll notice that state appropriations, that's our basic ed subsidy and other things, are well ahead of schedule and ahead of last year's pace. That's because we received a very significant increase in state aid. And you'll notice the federal is lagging, and that is because ESSER 2 expired, and also our IDEA funding from the NEIU finally just came in yesterday, actually. So we have to file for that and wait for the check to come. So we're several months behind on getting our IDEA funding. Now, on the expense side, did anyone happen to notice that in the instructional expense, it appears that our instructional expense went down year over year? That's a bit of an illusion without context, okay? So you wouldn't know from looking at this report, but this is actually an unusual year for payroll here at Abington Heights. Once every 10 years or so, we have to go from 26 pays to 27 pays just by nature of how the calendar falls, okay? This year, usually you take your salary, let's say it's $50,000, you divide it by 26, and then you come out with your biweekly pay. Well, in this leap year, we have 27 pays, so we divide your annual salary of $50,000 by 27, okay? So that artificially reduces year over year what the trend is, okay? So the thing that is deflating this instructional line item is, this line item is primarily salaries and benefits, so that is actually deflating this. So it may lead you to a false conclusion to think we're going to come in ahead there and bank some money. And my expectation is we're going to come in right where we budgeted, right? So you'll see that there. But just want to provide some context, and I also want to encourage people, when they do see variances like that, ask me the questions. And so this is a tool for board members to use to say what's going on here. And most of the times I do know what's going on here, but if I don't, I will go back, do the research, and get back to you. And that is true for this whole budget process. And that's kind of the moral of my story today, is I want to give you the tools to ask great questions. So any question you ask me today, if I don't know the answer, I'll come back in May with a chart or a graph or data. You have a question?
The IDEA amount, can you give us that amount?
It was like 500 and, I want to say 540,000. So we have to apply. We just got our allocation today. So we have to apply for it for reimbursement from the state.
That's what you budgeted for, pretty much around the same amount, right?
Yes,
Oh,
we should
great,
come in
okay.
right. That's what we expected it to be. So the next slide is, I'm not going to walk through all this small print, but let me just give you the backstory on it. We have a software. It's called Forecast 5. And it does two things for us. First, it helps us build out those forecasts that we used in the debt process, right? So when we were trying to decide if we can afford a certain debt load, the annual recurring payment, we were using this software to do that, to go out 5 years and then even 5 more years. The other thing that it does, it takes our current year finances on a month-by-month basis and helps us forecast forward to June 30th to see where we'll end up at the end of the year. And this is powerful because it has 5 years of data that it considers as we go forward. So it learns our spending patterns, it learns when we spend it, it learns when the revenues come in. And then it's not perfect, so there's a manual process we go through to adjust it and go through to come up with the best estimate possible. It will get more accurate month over month over month as we enter our data. But the moral of this story is in that small bluish gray box on the left-hand side in the center of the page. You'll see that the projection, how we'll finish the year, the current projection is at $610,000 to the positive, okay? So a surplus is currently projected. And that is largely fueled on the revenue side. You can see we're expected to come in considerably above the revenue number. We may come in a bit better than that. And I would also say that on the expense side, I have a sense that that positive projection that they're showing there may not be quite as positive. So I think we'll fill out the expense side a little bit more than is currently projected, but I also think we might do a little better on the revenue side. But just so you know where we're trending, we're not looking at a loss currently, and you know, things can change if we make additional investments in the current year, things that weren't planned for, something breaks, you know, some other headwind or tailwind comes up that we weren't aware of, grant, something, this will change. But we'll update this monthly and come back to you with it each month, okay? So that is where we are at in the current year. The next 2 pages are sort of your board report that is just more friendly on the eyes. This software presents the data in a little more friendly way. I thought I would show it to you and provide it for your review if it's something you'd like to see rather than the Excel-based version or in addition to the Excel-based version. Give me the feedback, and we'll do our best to make sure it gets in there as well. Okay. I don't expect an answer today, but if people like the Forecast 5 format, we'll make sure it gets to you. Okay. Okay. And now the other document that I placed in here is what I'm calling the draft general fund budget. Okay. Most folks have seen this every year in May and June. We're doing a draft here in April. So, and what this contains is our best estimates as to what we think next year will look like. The only thing certain about this is that many things will change in here between now and June. All right. Now, I went through this budget and I put some notes on the pertinent pages, okay? So I just want to highlight a few things as we go through. So this page, I'm not sure why it's not scrolling properly. The vertically oriented page there at the top, this is a calculation that we have to do with regard to fund balance. If you have too much unassigned fund balance, you can't raise taxes, okay? We fall into the 19 million or greater category of expenses. So our limit is 8% of fund balance unassigned to expenses. So our calculation comes in at 3.12%. We're comfortably under that threshold there, okay? So that is a calculation you just have to do. We go through it. Let's see, now we are on to, I guess it would be page, well, it says page 1 of 1, but so we are now looking at fund balance and total revenues, okay? So the fund balance here is what we begin the year with it, which is essentially the same thing as saying what we think we're going to end the prior year at. So here's our fund balance in total, $10,419,000, and you can see we've assigned $1.5 million for future salary and benefit increases, and we've committed $7 million for future facilities improvement projects, okay? So that is how you end up with an unassigned fund balance of the $1.9 million. And then we look at the revenues budgeted here at $56.7 million. I'll show you that on the next page in a little bit more detail. Okay, now we're on page 6. Click that through. All right, and I made several highlights here, and please stop me if you have a question about any of these revenue line items. So first, the largest revenue source we have is current real estate taxes, and this line item does include a 6.2% millage rate increase to the current rate to come up with that revenue number. I will say that the PDE software and allocation for property tax reduction is not out yet. So once they update that software and do put the amount in here, we will be reducing the taxes both on this budget and to the taxpayer by approximately $1 million. Okay, so we'll pull that out of this line item, and it will go into a state subsidy line item I just can't do it now because the software just does not allow for it. Here are a couple, let me give you some of the thinking behind some of the line items here. And you can go back to your board report and say, wait a second, I think we're gonna come in here. Why are you budgeting this? And this is where your mind should be going. What are you thinking, Jim? Are you a little too conservative? Are you accurate? Right? So current Act 511 taxes, that's earned income taxes plus real estate transfer taxes. So in this $5.6 million, we have $5 million budgeted for earned income tax and $600,000 for real estate transfer tax. Now, if you go back to your original first sheet, you can inform yourself and decide if that is a good estimate or not, and you can challenge the business manager standing here telling you that's what his estimate is. I will also say, when you come out with a first budget, it's not great practice to say we have all this money and we'll, you know, it's not sound budgeting approach. So we'll tighten up and we'll make the revenues more accurate as we see them, as we get closer. But this is a conservative revenue estimate that you see here before you. Now, if we don't run into anything recessionary and we see the economy as still humming as of June, this number will go up by several $100,000. Okay. Earnings on investments. You see we made $600,000 last year. You see that we're on pace to beat that number. You see that there are $350,000 budgeted here. Probably too conservative of a number. So when I come back to you in May, if these numbers still look too conservative, you should be asking me about them and saying, you know, so I want to give board members the tools to be able to ask good questions and challenge some of the assumptions. Basic ed funding formula. Now this is a 2% increase over the prior year is what is currently budgeted, because that's historically what we've gotten. Now historically the past 2 years are very different. We've received landmark investments of in excess of $500,000 the last 2 years. And we also have about $600,000 proposed by the government, but that is proposed by the government, right? So if that comes to fruition, if they use the same formula, if they make that landmark investment again in public education, that number will be about $500,000 too low. And then that's additional revenue that we may see. So we're following that closely. We're hopeful that they pass the budget on time this year so that we can have the correct number in there and make the correct plans with the subsidy. But for right now, we do have a conservative 2% increase on the basic ed subsidy there. Any questions on what the state's up to? I don't know, but we're following it as closely as we can, and you know, we're hopeful for a good result there, because those are game-changing investments that have been made over the last 2 years. The other thing I'll highlight in the revenue from federal sources, you will notice you don't see anything with the word ESSER or stimulus or ARP. That's because there are no more stimulus funds available. So in the 24-25 fiscal year, we are absorbing approximately $816,000 in ARP ESSER revenue. So it's a shift from federal to local effort, so to speak, to fund the ongoing expenses that we are paying for currently with the federal dollars. We did the same with ESSER 2, so we'll be absorbing that as well in the current, or the next fiscal year. I am going to skip forward to page 8, and I just am highlighting 2 minor things on page 8 here. When I talk about the $0 for homestead exclusion, or gaming money people refer to it as, you can see that is currently highlighted at $0. And this is the line item that will change once the state updates it. And then we also have the verification of the millage rate at 141.4467, and the software verifies that it is in fact within the index calculation there. So there are all things throughout this. The state has validations written throughout this, so it's hard to make a mistake in some of these calculations. It works both for and against you. It's just it's a challenging software, but they have a lot of checks to make sure that boards are staying within their bounds. On page 10, is that 10 there? Oh, it's kind of getting caught in between. Page 10, I just wanted to point out and just kind of show you how the Act 511 earned income tax and Act 511 real estate taxes work. So those are each 1% taxes. So if you purchase a house, we split that 1% 50-50 with the state. And if you earn income within our district, we split that with the local municipality 50-50. So we get a 0.5% on those items there. Okay. Now I'm on to page, let's see, page 12. And this gives you the overall, what we're looking at next year. And so this is a very, very summary level of expenses, okay? So sort of broken down in a manner that your board report is also broken down. But I did want to call out before we move on to the next page, the 5,000s or the other expenditures and financing uses. That's where our debt payments are in that line item there, okay? Now, in our initial projections, talking about the financial debt-related projections, we were talking about starting our first borrowing in 25, 26, not 24, 25. So we moved that up. So now in the next fiscal year, we have 400 approximately. We don't have the amortization schedule yet because we didn't go out for the bond yet. It didn't close. But the debt service is estimated on the high side to be $436,000 next year that we will add into our portfolio and pick up next year. Okay? Because I think we're closing in, what did they say, late April? Late April. So next April, May, we'll have the payment come due. So all in all, with that additional debt service, you come out currently to about a break even. And before we get into what's in there, I provided you a tool at the end of this document that allows you to analytically look at this year over year. Because the biggest fault I have with this PDE budget document is you'll notice there's only 1 year. You can't compare it to anything, okay? So what I did was I utilized our software. If you flip all the way to the last 2 pages of your document, actually it's the last 3 pages of your document, what we did here is I tried to focus on more useful descriptions, more useful categories, and give you what the year-over-year budget changes were. So you have the current year budget and next year's budget. Now, a lot of them you'll see there are still $0 changes between. That's because we're still doing sort of the status quo budget thing. So if there are cuts made in certain line items, you'll see variances coming up. If there are additions or additional investments made in another line item, you'll see changes there. Largely what you see are changes in salary and benefits. That happens to be where 75% of our expenses are. And we now know, because our 3 contracts, our professional staff, our support staff, and our Act 93 are all under contract. So we know what they're making next year. So the salaries you see here are actuals, okay? The only caveat is if a teacher moves columns or if a teacher resigns and then another teacher replaces that teacher. And support staff, the way that's structured now is, generally speaking, they all make the same thing as long in those first, unless you're grandfathered into the old system. But generally speaking, the support staff members will all get replaced at the same rate that they left. So we're really only talking about teachers who move columns or teachers who leave that could change the salary and benefit number. So that's a pretty good number that's in there right now.
tuition reimbursement that just recently was made, are you going to see an increase in that tuition reimbursement column?
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
So basically what had happened was the new contract had a new provision to allow for a $40,000 allotment for virtual learning, above and beyond kind of where teachers were at, because the old contract only allowed so many credits of online learning. So there was a new provision in that. The issue with the new provision was it went from July to June, but teacher reimbursement goes from September to August. So what we did was we needed to put them on the same calendar. So that provisional $40,000 that's in the contract, that had to be on the same calendar as every other tuition reimbursement and column movement. So all we did was right-side that, just to make sure that it's in alignment.
Thank you.
So it'd still be the same dollar amount cap, right? And then, so I don't expect any material change in that line item. Given in the middle of contracts, collective bargaining agreements, you don't see any anomalies. Usually toward the end is when people like to get their credits in case we go into a status quo, and those credits are no longer reimbursable. So again, my intention here was to provide tools to ask good questions. And this expense year over year, I'm hopeful it's helpful. I'm hopeful it's useful. If there's some other way you'd like to see it presented in my next presentation, I'm happy to provide it. If there are certain data points you'd like to see in the next presentation, would love to provide it. Were there any surprises as far as where the forecast was coming out or what the budget looks like? Any questions I can handle for you?
I was just curious. So I saw tuition for like charter schools is anticipated to drop.
Yes.
Why? Is there something that would drive that?
How about the driving force behind it, shall we?
So I think for the last 2.5 years or so, what we did was we had that number was around 1.9 million, and I think we had about 150 students in February of 22. So what we did is we called every single family to talk to them to say, you know, can you talk to me about why we lost your business? You know, you're an important customer. Tell me about your experience. And it really fell into like three big buckets. One was there what I would call like some COVID-related types of things where people left for probably philosophical reasons. There was a group that was just not satisfied with what we were doing, okay? And that would be on us, right? We didn't provide the level of service that they expected. And so I asked questions about where did we fall short? What do we need to do to bring you back? And then there was just kind of like the other bin. Perhaps they were just always in that. There's some medical things. There's a whole lot there. And over the last couple of years, we've worked to get that number that fluctuates between 90 to 100. So we've dropped it considerably. And that was our goal. And last year we adjusted our budget. So I told Jim, like, I said, okay, what was the percentage change from where we were before COVID? My goal was to cut that in half. So I said to Jim, cut it in half. Now I got to chase it. So that's what we did. So what you're seeing are some of those adjustments. And at this point, we're watching the numbers to see and talk to people about now kids have been in some of them the cyber charters because that's where most are, you know, going on 3 to 4 years. And when the more I talk to families, it's more like, hey, I want to ride it out. And so now I'm looking at a cycle. And what am I seeing when new students are coming in? And what I'm hypothesizing and hoping for is that we're going to see a lot less, and that kind of resets and works its way through.
They already answered it, don't go. On the salary, the top salary, it says salary, what is that?
So, the 111, so let's
Cause it went up $100,000.
So those are the ones, I believe are administration, the
Okay.
administration salaries. The teacher salaries, well, that obviously you can spell that one right now. Like the 191s, the custodians you see there, and then there's the 120. I'm gonna find that names here.
Service work?
Yes, there you are. Yeah, the 120. So same number of those, like,
I just didn't know that.
yeah, so just different categories of workers, and that's a category I should work on there, because it's clearly an admin. We can go into our accounting software and fix that.
So, down to the 300s.
The 300s?
What's the distinction? So on some of the bills that come in monthly,
Mm-hmm.
under legal bills, they'll be categorized under 330. So I'm just wondering that, then we see 331, I'm assuming is Attorney Audi and his firm?
Yes. So, yeah, solicitor related, our attorneys versus special ed attorney, due process, attorneys will go in that.
So 331 is, are there a specific listing, who falls under the solicitor?
I can get you that.
Okay. But it's not just the appointed solicitor for, that is Mr. Audi, Attorney Audi and his firm?
I think the term is, again, it's a catch-all there. I think it's the type of legal service, and like if it's part of a settlement or if it's day-to-day. It goes by the PDE chart of accounts, and this is a little bit too much of a catch-all term, solicitor. But generally speaking, yes, our solicitor, Mr. Audi, our tax attorney, who does the appeals, would fall there. That's how we code them when the invoices come in, and then the other legal services would be more of the type of legal service, like negotiations would fall in a different, like labor relations is different than solicitor. So we try to code them the best of our ability and split those apart. So Mr. Audi can fall in both categories there, but without pulling out the bills and going through them, I can't tell you exactly who fell where, but we do code into one of those two based on the nature of the legal service provided and whom provides it. So again, if it's a settlement to a special ed attorney, that would go in 332 versus a solicitor in the 331.
So I guess on that point, we have an appointed solicitor in the district. And so that's John Attorney Audi and his firm. And then do we have other appointed solicitors?
Is Marshall Dennehy appointed, or we use Will based on, I think, initially our insurance carrier.
Yes, correct.
So whether they have an agreement and that's who we use, and that's worked out well for us, but I don't think we specifically have an agreement with.
No, I don't recall a time where we approved a fee agreement. Like annually, we get a fee agreement from Mr. Audi, Sweet Stevens, Katz and Williams firm, but the Will's firm works for our insurance carrier, CM Regent, and they're the sort of appointed one, not by us, by the insurance company. They're part of the panel that handles those cases.
So it would fall within those two.
Yeah.
Attorney
McFarland.
McPartland and Attorney Audi.
Yeah.
services, that could be a combination, that's kind of a catch-all there. Could be auditors, could be, our,
Architects,
that could fall,
curriculum consultants.
yeah, there are a number of items that could fall in there. And again, I could pull the detail, out of that, but, also some items that we pull out of, like, clerical services that we buy from, Kelly Services can fall in professional services in here. And again, I can sit with you with any detail and pull out, the vendors that fall here. But off the top of my head, I don't have
Understood. Thank
exactly
you.
who's there.
That was helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Getting back to the salaries.
The salaries, 191 custodians. Why is there a negative 16.5% projection?
Yes, so there were, not to single you out, there were multiple retirements in that, so it amounts to 2 full-time, 1 part-time retirement that occurred in the class. Those were replaced with subcontracted employees.
Is there any conversation to hire more custodials through the district, or are we going to keep the model that we're using, the outside company?
I think some of this goes back, to answer your question with a little bit of context, that there was a philosophy that went back probably spanning a decade or so, where Jim, previous superintendent and board, started that work. So as people retired, the subcontractor picked that up. We've talked about taking a look at the outcome. So is there a noticeable difference between the outcomes of the product, the work product from before, as compared to now? Those are ongoing discussions. So if we come to a point where we say to the board, hey, we feel as if, we need to reverse this kind of 10-year strategy. At this point, I'm not seeing it, but we remain open and we talk about that. Certainly, cost isn't everything. We want clean buildings and things like that. And there's a lot that goes into it, because I think that differential is almost like 2 times.
There is a significant cost differential, but also, to Chris's point, we were just talking about this today, talking about our options. It's almost a weekly conversation as to what's the best way to, tackle keeping the buildings clean. I talk with Tom Parfrey about it. It's a continual evaluation of what's going on.
But for custodian to custodian, regardless of where they're coming from, the numbers haven't changed. We still have the same amount of custodial staff that we've had.
I think that it's fair to say that number fluctuates. We're not, so in the beginning of the year, we weren't happy with what the high school looked like, and we were understaffed. We worked with our carrier to kind of get up to speed, but it's almost like a perpetual hiring process. It doesn't appear to be a job that longevity would be a word that would characterize it.
I'm not sure we look at it in terms of what's the exact number of staffing, trend it out over time. I think you need to look at the body of work that needs to be done. I think more classrooms are full than ever. So the needs are different throughout the buildings. So we rely on our Director of Buildings and Grounds to give us feedback to say, is it not clean because someone's not doing their job, or is it not clean because there's not enough people? And I think we heard a lot of feedback at the beginning of this year that there was not enough people at the high school, and we put some measures in place to make sure that that happened.
And we'll have something, we're working with our contractor now where, this